Hello friends, welcome to E-Pathshala. I am Shagun Sharma, Assistant Professor in Political Science in Government College for Girls, Sector 42, Chandigarh. The paper is Foreign Policy of India and the module is India-Sri Lanka Relations. Sri Lanka is the nearest neighbor of India. Regarding the size, India is at least 50 times bigger than Sri Lanka, but both shares cordial and healthy relationship with each other. Sri Lanka and India have long historical, cultural and religious ties, but India and Sri Lanka relations witnessed huge phases of ups and downs in maintaining their relations after they became independent. The initial foreign policy of both the countries were cordial towards each other, but later differences began to grow. One such difference was because of an island known as Kachadweep Island. After the issue was resolved, the main area around which the conflict between both the countries was centered was the ethnic problem of Tamils. Due to terrorism in Jaffna Plateau of Sri Lanka, there were huge conflicts between India and Sri Lankan government. This module will apprise the readers to the various issues of disputes between India and Sri Lanka. Both are the close neighbors with historical, political, social and religious similarities, and simultaneously both are in disputes on certain issues. Hence, the study of their relations becomes essential. Various stages of relations. Clear analysis of India-Sri Lanka relations can be done on the basis of following classifications: relations with differences, friendly relations, tense relations, return of cordial relations. Relations with differences. India and Sri Lanka both were liberated almost at the same time after a long period from colonial slavery. It was expected that both will maintain mutual friendly relations with similar approach. The decision taken by the Joint National Party of Sri Lanka in early years on foreign policy were having differences with Indian policies. Even after these contradictions, both have adopted similar approaches on various international issues. The issues on which both were having similar approaches were: both observed faith in the unity of nations of this region through the participation in the Conference of Asian Nations in March 1947, even after the dependence on colonial powers. Both opposed the Dutch colonialism during a conference in New Delhi on the question of freedom of Indonesia in January 1949. Both the countries observed faith in the policy of non-alignment. Both got the membership of Commonwealth nations. Essentially, there has been a lack of friendly relations between the both in early years, but there were no hatred relations at all. They have adopted the similar approaches on many issues even after the disputes on some important issues. It may be one of the reasons that Sri Lankan government at that time was not a proper expression of public opinion. That was a government only of few rich people of urban elite class having Western education, which was representing only about 7% of total population of Sri Lanka. Friendly relations. These relations changed rapidly and there have been friendly relations of India with both the later governments. Following were the reasons of having friendly relations between both the countries during the regime of Bandar Naike. The new government, after taking the charge, asked the British to leave the military and navy bases from Sri Lanka. Now Sri Lanka adopted clearer approach on non-alignment in foreign policy. Sri Lanka adopted the approach similar to India on Suez and Hungary problems in international politics too. Both countries tried to solve the bilateral issues, particularly the problems of migrants, sympathetically and swiftly. Both adopted the similar approach on the Tibet issue of 1959. In this way, the regime of Bandar Naike has been the indicator of improvement in relations of both the countries. Its main reason has been the courtesy visits by the political leaders of India and Sri Lanka. Nehru visited Sri Lanka in May 1957 and Bandar Naike visited India in November 1956 and December 1957. Sri Lanka organized Commonwealth Parliamentary Conference jointly with India and Pakistan in 1957. The process of cooperation remained continued in the regime of Shrimao Bhandar Naike also. However, the voice of different approaches also erupted in some matters. Following were the reasons for the development of activities of friendship and cooperation between both the countries. Sri Lanka supported the accession of Goa, Daman and Diu in India after liberation from British in 1960. After the death of Nehru, Sri Lanka declared the public holiday on 28th May in the honor of Nehru. Sri Lanka started to follow the foreign policy of non-alignment more clearly. It adopted the friendly attitude with both the parties of dispute by remaining neutral on disputed matters. It made important efforts to solve the issue of migrants through the Shastri Bhandar Naike Agreement of 1964 on migrants. Along with these cooperative aspects, differences were also on some aspects. The most important dispute among them has been on the role of Sri Lanka during the Indo-China War of 1962. During the regime of Bhandar Naike, the relations of Sri Lanka remained more cordial with China instead of India. That's why Sri Lanka did not declare China an aggressor during Indo-China War of 1962 and welcomed the one-sided ceasefire declaration by China. But this problem has another aspect also. Sri Lanka called the conference of 6 non-aligned countries in Colombo to solve the Indo-China dispute. Though the recommendations of this conference were important, yet could not be executed due to non-cooperative attitude of China. The role of China cannot be denied in this regard. In this way, the relations during the regime of Bhandar Naike have been normal even after some disputes. India-Sri Lanka relations remained cordial due to the positive approach adopted by Dudley Senanaike government and again by Bhandar Naike government. Most stability in relations appeared in this period due to various treaties and agreements signed by both the countries. These were: both the countries worked together in UN to declare the Indian Ocean as a zone of peace in 1971. India sent military assistance to Sri Lanka on the request of its government to suppress the anti-government activities in 1971. By showing the broad-mindedness, India handed over the island of Kachdev to Sri Lanka in 1974. Though Sri Lanka maintained complete neutrality during Indo-Pak War of 1971, yet there was no negative impact on the relations of both. Contrary to this, last efforts were taken to solve the problem of migrants between both the countries through the joint declaration by Indira Gandhi Bhandar Naike in 1974. Tense relations. During the government of Jayawardene and Premdas, the main issue of the dispute has been the problem of Tamil migrants. The events of this period kept the relations of both the countries unfriendly. The relations of both countries touched their lower point during this period. The Tamil Sinhalese communal riots of 1981 and 1983 not only repeated the 1958 and 1977 incidents but demonstrated the extreme disappointment also. Without mentioning the detailed description of events of this historical context, it becomes clear about their situation from the different main incidents of the time. Mainly in this period, India and Sri Lanka signed the historical treaty on 29th May 1987 to solve this problem. As a result, a soldier at the time of taking the guard of honor attacked to kill Rajiv Gandhi. India sent its peacekeeping force to Sri Lanka on 29th July 1987 to execute the agreement under the Articles 2.14 and 2.16 of the agreement. The peacekeeping force returned back without completing its task according to the conditions of the agreement after Premdas has taken the charge as president. Hence, in this period, there was a negative impact on the relations of both along with tarnishing the image of India. Later on, due to the involvement of Tamil terrorists in the assassination of Rajiv Gandhi, India not only stopped the support to them but also appealed to the Sri Lankan government to hand over their chief Prabhakaran. Return of cordial relations. The relations of India and Sri Lanka again returned back to cordiality after taking the charge of government in Sri Lanka by Chandrika Kumaratunga. After that, Sri Lankan Foreign Minister visited India during 6 to 10th October 1994 and increased the trust on issues of mutual cooperation. These relations became stronger after the official visit of Chandrika Kumartunga to India in 1995. Chandrika Kumartunga once more visited India unofficially in 1996. At the same time, a non-Congress government was formed in India which speeded up this process of bilateral relations. The relations of both the countries improved through the policies of National Front government, particularly the Gujarat Principle towards the neighbours. The same policies of India remained to continue even after the Vajpayee government came to power. Both countries signed an agreement to increase the free trade system during the visit of Chandrika Kumartung to India in December 1998, which strengthened the bilateral economic relations. The most important was that Chandrika Kumartunga visited India after the Pokhran II of May 1998, which proves that Sri Lanka has properly evaluated the security initiatives of India. The efforts for mutual friendship between India and Sri Lanka continued. Internal crisis got intensified in Sri Lanka in April to May 2000. With increasing the tension between government and LTTE, the incidents of ethnic riots and murders started. Sri Lanka government appealed India for help. The Foreign Minister of Sri Lanka, Lakshman Kadirgamad, visited India in this regard in May 2000. Keeping in view the past experiences, particularly of 1987 to 90, Indian government expressed its helplessness by following the policy of caution, worry and continuity on this issue. Though Sri Lanka didn't like this, but India did not want to repeat its bad experience. To clarify the difference of thinking between both the countries, Indian Foreign Minister Jaswant Singh visited Colombo in June 2000. All the disputes related to free trade agreement signed by Kumartunga in 1998 have also been solved up to the end of this year. Hence, the overall relations have been cordial even after some differences in approaches. Though after the assassination of Rajiv Gandhi and the failure of peace agreement, India kept itself away from the talks between Sri Lankan government and Tamil organization. But the worry about the ordinary Tamil citizens has also been influencing India-Sri Lanka relations. The above phase of peace has become stronger after the change in leadership in Sri Lanka and its victory on Tamil terrorists. It became clear from the decision of newly elected President Mahinda Rajapaksa in 2005 to select India for his foreign visit that new leadership gives utmost importance to India in its bilateral relations. During this visit, India and Sri Lanka not only signed the agreement on comprehensive economic partnership, but both countries also signed on the consent letters for the cooperation in the fields of railway, air traffic, information technology and energy. As a result, economic cooperation between the both got strengthened. Along with the bilateral efforts, both the countries are also doing efforts to improve their mutual relations through multilateral organizations like SAARC, BIMSTEC and NAM. Besides, both countries came closer to each other in economic field through signing the agreement on free trade. There were some significant problems between Sri Lanka and India. Some out them have been solved while others are in progress towards solution. And the future of relations between the both will depend on the solutions of these problems. There are 5 main problems between India and Sri Lanka. Among them, 4 are of ordinary level, the solution of which either done or possible to do, and 1 is of complicated nature. These are as follows: matter of Kutch Dweep Island, problem of smuggling, problem of trade deficit, problem of Tamil migrants, demand for separate Tamil state. To understand the India-Sri Lanka relations, the detailed analysis of these problems is essential, which is as follows. Matter of Kutch Dweep Island. Kutch Island is situated in the Pak Strait with an area of total 200 square acres. India makes its claim on this island due to the right of King Damnath's zamindari since 1880, while Sri Lanka claims it as its part on the basis of some approval by Indians during the British period in the 20th century. Hence, there is a dispute between both the countries on the issue of sovereignty on this island since 1949. Later on, both the countries grappled and dispute on the issue of this island for demarcation of their maritime boundary. Finally, India accepted the sovereignty of Sri Lanka on this island on 28 June 1974 while demonstrating its liberal attitude. In this way, both the countries witnessed vision and maturity by solving this dispute peacefully. Problem of smuggling. The criminal elements of both the countries perform smuggling due to open maritime boundary. Both the countries are influenced with this problem and it can be reduced or eliminated by the joint efforts and cautions of both the countries. Problem of trade deficit. Balance of trade has also been a problem between both the countries because mutual trade deficit has been in the favor of Sri Lanka. Its main reason is that 90% of Sri Lanka's export is tea, rubber and coconut product. India is also a main producer of these goods. Hence, it need not import these goods. Though trade increased in the preceding decades with the efforts of both the countries, but India's imports from Sri Lanka are still negligible. Problem of Tamil migrants. From the beginning, the most serious problem which has affected the India-Sri Lanka relations in a significant way is the issue of Tamil migrants. This problem is still a main hurdle in the cordial relations of both the countries. During the British period, a large number of Indian Tamils were sent to Sri Lanka to be settled in the mountains of Kandyan for the agriculture of tea and rubber. This number was about 10 lakh. They are called Indian Tamils even after being the inhabitants of Sri Lanka for generations. There was no difference between these Indian Tamils and local Sinhalese before independence. Both were entitled with equal political and civil rights. But after the independence, Sri Lanka has deprived them from right to vote through its Citizen Act number 18, India Pakistani Resident Act number 3 and Amendment Acts number 37 and number 45. Besides, for the citizenship they have to prove that either they themselves or their parents have been born in Sri Lanka and living continuously in Sri Lanka since 1939. This situation has created many problems for Tamil Indians. From population point of view, there are 73.95% Sinhalese and 18.12% Tamils in Sri Lanka. Indian Tamils are settled mainly in northern and eastern part of Sri Lanka. They are 30% of total voters in Sri Lanka at the time of independence. Due to this new act, their numbers reduced to 20% and lakhs of people found themselves in the situation of statelessness. There were 4 reasons responsible for this kind of step taken by Sri Lanka. Due to the economic pressure on increasing population, the locals thought that opportunities of employment will increase if Indian Tamils leave Sri Lanka. Bad impact on economic exchange due to sending a large part of their earnings to India by Indian migrants. Tamil migrants couldn't make them attached to Sri Lanka even after a long stay. It was necessary to deprive them from right to vote for political reasons also. The above reasons directly affect the political systems of southern states of India. India tried to solve these problems in 4 stages by adopting the different approaches. From 1947 to 1950, Nehru viewed this problem in the broader context of Indian migrants. That's why Nehru adopted a tough stand on the return of Tamils to India in a larger number. His stand was that the Tamils of Sri Lanka will stay now in Sri Lanka. From 1950 to 1962, Nehru granted them citizenship according to the Article 8 of Indian Constitution by doing an agreement on bilateral basis in this regard. In this way, Nehru's policy on one side has been to protect the Indian Tamils and on the other side not to decline the bilateral relations. Perhaps only due to this, first agreement was signed in 1954 between India and Sri Lanka in this regard. From 1964 to 1981, Shastri and Indira adopted a new approach by leaving the Nehru's approach. Under this, they signed agreements to solve the problems of stateless Tamils on the conditions of Sri Lanka by considering the ethnic issue very important for the improvement of bilateral relations. They tried to solve this problem on the basis of agreements of 1964 and 1974. Shastri Bandaranaike agreement took place in 1964. But even after these agreements, the act of immigration is not occurring in such speed and quantity as was proposed in these agreements. Besides, this problem took a serious shape in the decade of 1980 due to the riots happened time to time, unbending attitude of government and the policy of taking political benefits. In 1981, Indira denied to grant citizenship of India to any Tamil by adopting the Nehru's approach. Shastri Bandaranaike agreement ended in 1981, and now the responsibility of India is to bring back 5.06 lakh Tamils and to grant citizenship to those who applied for that. Granting citizenship to rest of the stateless people is the responsibility of Sri Lanka. In this regard, later on, Sri Lanka expressed its consent to grant citizenship to 94,000 other people on the basis of a trilateral agreement of 1986. Finally, Jayawardene government had to pass Citizen Act of 1986 due to some pressures, which states that after granting citizenship by India and Sri Lanka, the rest of the stateless people will be granted citizenship by Sri Lanka. Demand for separate Tamil state. Another problem also emerged with the solution of Tamil migrants problem. Due to the emerging ethnic riots and changing political nature, the Tamils settled in Sri Lanka started a demand for a separate state. The sense of insecurity, mistrust and terror increased after the Jayawardene came into power. In this environment, the violence against Tamils broke out instead of accepting the demands of Tamil United Liberation Front, and the stand of government was also against them. Riots against Tamil again broke up now after 1958, and as a result, dangerous riots took place in 1977, 1981 and 1993. The most serious thing in these riots was that the gap between these riots was decreasing rapidly. Various terrorist organizations were formed by Tamils due to the fear of these riots. Chiefs among them were Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, People's Liberation Organization for Tamil Eelam, Eelam People's Revolutionary Liberation Fund, Eelam Revolutionary Organization of Students, Tamil Eelam Liberation Organization and some other secessionist groups associated with these organizations. The Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam was involved in violent riots for autonomy and self-governance in the Jaffna island of Sri Lanka from 1982. About 1,50,000 Tamils entered in the Indian state of Tamil Nadu after the riots of 1983. Consequently, whereas the politics of Tamil Nadu influenced the government of India, the Sri Lankan government started to doubt government of India and thought Tamil Nadu a base of Tamil terrorists. In this context, the Indian policy was suffering from five-fold tension, which is as follows. Government was to stabilize the politics of South India. The influence of Sri Lankan events on the politics of Tamil Nadu was to be reduced. To observe caution in the support of separatist powers, it could cause the support to the internal separatists of India. To stop the interference of outside power. To save itself from the allegation of interference in the domestic affairs of other country. Consequently, India adopted the proactive policy in this regard after 1983, but could not achieve any success. Sri Lankan government imposed the economic blockades on Jaffna in January 1987 to wipe out the Tamil rebels and attacked from all sides in May. India, considering it a humanitarian problem, sent its aid on 1st June 1987 under the banner of Red Cross. India sent this aid on 5th June by military planes even after the opposition of Sri Lankan government. This increased the bitterness more. But after a lot of debate, both countries reached Rajiv Jayawardene agreement on 29th July 1987. The main conditions of this agreement were as follows. The ceasefire will become effective within 48 hours in northern and eastern provinces. Referendum regarding accession of northern and eastern provinces will be held up to 31st December 1987. One governor, council of minister and legislative council will be formed after the elections of North-East Provincial Council. Elections in United North-East Province will be held within 3 months and up to December in any case in which the observer will be invited from India. India is committed to execute this agreement and it will not join any such activity which increases the problem. Sri Lankan government will grant political pardon to the rebels involved in this. Whenever it will be necessary, India will provide military training and weapons to solve this problem. Both countries will form a joint machinery to stop the activities of intelligence agencies of other countries. India sent a peace force of 1,50,000 soldiers to Sri Lanka to execute this agreement. Both the parties of Sri Lanka did not think the activities of peace force legitimate. In this way, sending of peace force was a blunder by India. On one side, it annoyed Sri Lankan government, and on the other, the rebel organizations also. There was resentment in Indian army also. 1100 Indian soldiers died in this activity. Keeping in view the wide criticism of peace force, the commander of 54th Infantry Division deputed in Sri Lanka, Lieutenant General S.C. Sardesh Pandey, decided to return his commission rank and war medals. The image of the power of Indian forces to fight against the rebels was also damaged largely. Consequently, the relations of both the countries got more tensed. To conclude this module, we can say that initial hitches in India-Sri Lanka relations gradually faded away. In 1990s, India-Sri Lanka faced a new kind of relationship after the end of ethnic problem in Sri Lanka. When India took away its peace force from Sri Lanka, gradually the relationship warmed. Moreover, India also began to loosen up its sensitivity towards the Tamil cause after the assassination of Indian Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi. Now, both the countries focus more on cultural and trade relations between each other. Both the countries are also responsible in making the Indian Ocean zone a zone of peace among each other. Thank you.